10 minutes. That's all it took. A skillet, a handful of pantry staples, and supper was on the table before the evening news even started. In the 1960s, nobody called these quick meals or meal prep. They were just dinner. Every working mother, every tired father, every grandmother stretching a paycheck knew how to pull something warm and filling together in the time it takes to boil water. Most of these recipes never made it into a cookbook. They lived on index cards, in phone calls between sisters, and in the muscle memory of hands that had done it 1,000 times. One of these uses nothing but canned tomatoes and day-old bread, and it might be the best thing you eat all week. Another turns a single egg into a meal that fed a family of 5. These dishes weren't fancy, but they kept millions of American families going through some of the hardest years this country has seen. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 60 easy 10-minute meals from the 1960s that every senior should know. Number 21. Buttered noodles with salt and pepper. A box of store-brand egg noodles cost 89 cents and contained 8 servings. You boiled a handful, drained them, added a tablespoon of butter, salt, and black pepper. 3 minutes of cooking. 0 minutes of thought. This was the meal that mothers made for sick children in the 1950s, and that widowers made for themselves in the 1990s. The simplicity was not a compromise. It was the entire point. For a senior whose appetite had faded, plain buttered noodles went down easy and stayed down. No strong flavors to reject, no textures to fight. Nursing home cooks knew this. When a resident refused everything else on the tray, they brought buttered noodles. It worked almost every time. The meal was so plain it was invisible. Nobody photographed it. Nobody wrote about it. But it kept people eating when nothing else could. A geriatric nutritionist at Johns Hopkins published a paper in 2018 noting that simple carbohydrate meals like buttered noodles played a critical role in preventing dangerous weight loss among elderly patients living independently. Number 18. Spanish rice skillet. Frank made this the way a Navy cook had shown him in 1945 on a troop ship coming back from Leyte Gulf. 1 cup of long-grain rice, toasted in a dry pan until it smelled like popcorn. Half an onion, 1 can of diced tomatoes, chicken broth from a bouillon cube, cumin, chili powder, salt. 10 minutes covered, no peeking. The whole thing came out of the pan onto the plate in one heap, steam rising. The Navy cook, a man named Earl Ruiz from El Paso, had taught a dozen sailors this recipe on the long passage home because the galley was running short of everything except rice and canned tomatoes. 34 years later, Frank still made it the same way, including the cumin, which you could not buy on Webster Avenue in 1945, but which sat in a small jar in his cabinet in 1979. And the cumin was the detail that told you the dish had traveled. A man from the Hill District in Pittsburgh was cooking a recipe that had crossed 3 oceans and 40 years to land on his plate. Earl Ruiz had learned it from his own grandmother in El Paso. Earl's grandmother had learned it from her mother, who had cooked it on a cast-iron plancha over a wood fire in a small kitchen outside Juarez before the 1910 revolution. The recipe had passed through a troop ship in 1945 and settled in a Pittsburgh row house by 1979. Frank did not know any of that. He knew the toasted smell of rice, the way the tomatoes bubbled down to paste, the small orange circles of fat on the surface when the cumin hit the hot oil. He knew the meal cost less than 80 cents to make and fed him for 2 nights. The rest of the history was carried in the bouillon cube and the small jar of cumin, silent, and he ate the dish without asking. Fried cabbage cost almost nothing. A full head fed a family of 5, and the only other ingredient was salt pork, which was the cheapest cut at the smokehouse or the company store. You shredded the cabbage coarse, got the skillet hot, laid the salt pork in until it colored, then added the cabbage all at once and covered the pan long enough for steam to wilt it. Then you took the lid off and let the water cook out until the edges browned at the bottom of the pan. The pinch of sugar was the secret, not enough to taste sweet, just enough to pull the natural sugars out of the cabbage and help it caramelize, and the women who knew this never needed to say it out loud because they had learned it by watching. In Depression-era Appalachia, Cabbage was one of the few vegetables that grew cheap and reliable in Rocky Mountain soil, and fried cabbage with side meat appeared on supper tables across West Virginia and Virginia coal country 3 and 4 nights a week without anyone considering it hardship. It tasted like something made with care. It was. Cornbread crumbled into a glass of cold buttermilk was a supper most people under 50 have never heard of, but anyone raised in the rural South or Appalachia knows it the way you know your own name. You took a chunk of leftover cornbread, cold from this morning or the night before, broke it into a tall glass, poured buttermilk over it until it was swimming, and ate it with a long spoon while standing at the counter. During the Depression, when cornmeal cost a few cents a bag and buttermilk stayed cool in the creek without refrigeration, this was what families ate when nothing else was left. They called regular milk sweet milk to tell it apart from the tangy, thick stuff that lasted longer in the heat. The taste was sour and crumbly and sharp, and if you grew up eating it, nothing on this earth can stand in for that exact combination. Your grandmother never measured the buttermilk. She knew the right amount by the weight of the glass in her hand. Welsh rarebit in its quick version brought pub-style comfort to kitchen tables, requiring only cheese, milk, and toast to create something surprisingly sophisticated. Seniors who remembered this dish from earlier decades simplified the traditional recipe into something achievable in under 10 minutes. Sharp cheddar was grated and melted slowly in a small saucepan with a splash of milk, dash of Worcestershire sauce, and sometimes pinch of dry mustard. The mixture was stirred until smooth, then spooned generously over toast placed on a plate. The cheese sauce pooled around bread, creating a dish part soup and part sandwich, eaten with knife and fork. The flavors were bold and savory, the texture rich and comforting. For seniors eating alone, Welsh rarebit felt like treating yourself to something special without leaving home or spending much money. This dish transformed ordinary pantry ingredients into something that tasted like care and intention. Waldorf salad brought crisp apples, crunchy celery, and toasted walnuts together in a creamy dressing that grandmothers could assemble while the turkey rested. Created at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel in the 1890s, this salad became a Christmas staple because it required no cooking and used ingredients that kept well through winter months. Grandmothers diced crisp red apples, sliced tender celery stalks, and roughly chopped walnuts before folding everything into mayonnaise, lightened with a splash of lemon juice. The lemon served double duty, brightening the dressing while preventing the apples from browning. Some families added raisins or grapes for extra sweetness, while others preferred the original simplicity of just 3 main ingredients. The salad could be made hours ahead and refrigerated, though grandmothers knew it tasted best when assembled just before serving, so the apples stayed crisp. Waldorf salad proved that elegance didn't require complexity, just quality ingredients combined with care. Cottage cheese pancakes were the forgotten fitness favorite of the 1970s. High in protein, light in texture, and ready in minutes. Cottage cheese, eggs, and a spoonful of flour made the batter. A hot pan did the rest. They cooked fast, puffing slightly around the edges, golden on both sides. The joy of cooking promoted them as part of a modern health breakfast, long before protein was a buzzword. Their flavor was mild but rich, tangy from the cheese and soft like soufflé inside. Served with fruit, honey, or jam, they felt both wholesome and indulgent. They became a favorite of busy parents and early risers who wanted real food without the fuss. Each pancake was proof that nourishment could be effortless. The smell of them frying, warm, milky, slightly sweet, could make any morning softer. Today, few remember how simple they were to make, but once, they were the breakfast that promised a better day. Chocolate-dipped marshmallows on sticks turned simplicity into celebration. A bag of marshmallows, a bar of chocolate, and a handful of sprinkles were all you needed. You melted the chocolate slowly, dipped the marshmallows one by one, and lined them up to cool on wax paper. Each one became a small piece of Halloween art, shiny, sweet, and full of charm. Parents made them the night before parties, letting kids decorate them with crushed candy or colored sugar. They were bright, festive, and surprisingly elegant for something made from pantry leftovers. Kids waved them around like candy wands, sticky fingers leaving chocolate fingerprints on everything. You could make dozens in under an hour, perfect for last-minute gatherings or trick-or-treat swaps. They tasted like every good part of childhood, soft, sugary, and just a bit over the top. A bite meant chocolate cracked, marshmallow squished, and smiles followed. It was fun disguised as food, a Halloween staple that never needed perfection to be adored. Cold potato and pickle salad was everything the name promised. Cheap, fast, and just sharp enough to wake you up. Chopped boiled potatoes, often left over from the night before, were tossed with diced pickles and sometimes onions in a mustard-based dressing. There was no mayo in most versions, though families who could afford it might add a little for creaminess. This dish came together fast and was served cold, making it perfect for summer meals, picnics, or quick lunches. The pickles added salt and crunch, the potatoes added bulk, and the dressing brought the whole thing to life. It was a no-cook wonder, ideal for busy families or days when the stove just could not be used. Some homemakers even kept a bowl of this on hand in the icebox, ready to scoop and serve with bread or cold meat. It was not glamorous, but it was reliable, and it filled out a plate without breaking the budget. That was the thing about 1920s cooking. You did not need much, just a little know-how and a good eye for leftovers. Sloppy Joe skillet brought a sweet tang to busy weeknights when there was barely time to sit, let alone cook. Ground beef hit the hot skillet first, sizzling as it browned while the cook stirred in chopped onions and a quick sauce of tomato paste, vinegar, brown sugar, and a shake of paprika. Within minutes, the mixture thickened into a rich, saucy filling that perfumed the kitchen with a scent both savory and slightly sweet. Soft sandwich rolls were split and warmed while the beef bubbled, ready to soak up every drop. The sloppy name came alive the moment the mixture met the bread, spilling deliciously over the sides and begging for napkins. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of meat across several sandwiches, and children delighted in the messy fun of every bite. Fast, filling, and friendly to any budget, the Sloppy Joe skillet earned its place as a dependable working man's dinner that felt like a small party at the table. This one came straight out of the open the pantry and hope for a miracle school of cooking. Scrambled eggs with canned chili was never in any cookbook, but it made it onto plates across America faster than most 5-ingredient dinners. Grandma would beat a few eggs with whatever milk she had left, toss them in a skillet, and stir them just until they were barely set. Then came the chili, straight from the can, full of beans and spice and a little bit of mystery meat. It would warm right on top of the eggs until the kitchen smelled like a diner on a slow afternoon. A few slices of toast on the side, maybe a wedge of cheese if you were lucky, and you had yourself a meal. It was hearty, messy, and completely satisfying. No one asked what brand the chili was or whether the eggs were farm fresh. What mattered was that it was hot, filling, and on the table in 10 minutes. It was meals like this that made it possible to get through the rest of the week. And once you have eaten it once, you will understand why it never needed a recipe. So our next dish comes with a bit of a history lesson that goes way further back than the time of our grandparents. Ham and cheese quesadillas may have been what they were binge-eating daily and serving up to us, but where did quesadillas ever come from? Apparently, they were not an American invention, and nobody could really find a solid name that they could credit with making the idea up first, until people did some history digging and found out that. Spanish settlers that tried their hand at taking over Central America in the very early days of the land brought Mexican culture with them. The rest, as they say, is history, and the people of the USA took to quesadillas very well. Especially easy variants like the ham and cheese one, which meant that you almost always had a snack that hit the taste buds just right and made you full too. The best part about quesadillas is that they are so quick to prepare and easy to make that you can enter Flavortown in just 10-15 minutes, which is a pretty good sell for anybody. Convenient food is always the best after all. Number 16. Oatmeal with brown sugar. A canister of old-fashioned oats cost $3.49 in 2024 and contained 30 servings. That was 12 cents a bowl. You measured half a cup of oats, added water, microwaved it for 90 seconds, and stirred in a spoonful of brown sugar. 5 grams of protein, 4 grams of fiber. A warm bowl that felt like morning even when you ate it at 7 in the evening. The Quaker Oats Company began marketing oatmeal as a health food in the 1980s, but Depression-era families had been eating it for survival long before anyone cared about cholesterol. For a senior living alone, oatmeal served a double purpose. It was breakfast when you ate it in the morning, and it was comfort when you ate it at night. The warmth of the bowl in your hands on a cold evening in February mattered as much as the nutrition inside it. Meals on Wheels programs across the country reported that oatmeal was the #1 food item that recipients already had in their homes before the first delivery arrived. It preceded the help. Number 22, tomato soup with rice. 1 can of Campbell's condensed tomato, 23 cents at Kroger in 1979. Half a cup of leftover rice from the night before. A tablespoon of butter stirred in at the end. You heated the soup, stirred in the rice, let the rice warm through. 6 minutes. This was a dish that Polish grandmothers in the Hill District had been making for 60 years, long before Campbell's put it on their label. In the old country, the rice was whatever was cheapest that month. Wheat, barley, sometimes potato grated thin. In Pittsburgh, it was Uncle Ben's. One thing few people talk about with this dish is how the rice thickened the soup into something heavier than soup, something closer to porridge, the way peasant food has always found ways to stretch itself into a full meal. He learned it from a woman named Helena Kowalski, who lived 2 doors down on Webster Avenue and brought him a covered bowl the week Rose died. She did not speak much English. She did not need to. The bowl was the sentence. The recipe came with it, pantomimed at his kitchen counter the next afternoon. A can of soup, a scoop of rice, a finger to her lips and a shake of her head, meaning no salt, the can has enough. Then she left. Frank made it that night, and again the next. Tomato gravy started in the bacon grease left from breakfast. A spoon of flour stirred in until the roux turned pale gold, then a quart of home-canned tomatoes dumped in and mashed down with a fork. The whole thing thickened in the time it took to split the biscuits. It wasn't a sauce. It was a gravy, and there's a difference any mountain cook would insist on, because a sauce is something fancy, and a gravy is what you make when supper has to come from the shelf. Families across Kentucky and West Virginia kept canned tomatoes year-round for this dish, putting up 40 or 50 quarts each August so that winter suppers had something red and hot to pour over bread. The trick was the roux. You couldn't rush it, and the women who made this knew the exact moment the flour changed from raw to ready just by the way the skillet smelled. You poured it over biscuits that were already cold, and the gravy brought them back to life. The last jar of tomatoes in February had a different weight to it, and she always said so. The tomato sandwich needed exactly 3 things: soft white bread, mayonnaise, and a tomato so ripe the juice ran down your wrist the moment you sliced it. In the South, where summer gardens overflowed from June through September, this wasn't a side dish or a snack, it was lunch. Harriet Ross Colquitt documented it in the Savannah Cookbook in 1933, though families had been making it for generations before anyone thought to write it down. The rules were unwritten, but firm. Duke's mayonnaise if you were from the Carolinas, Hellman's if you were from anywhere else. Tomato at room temperature, never refrigerated, because cold kills the flavor. Salted heavier than you'd think. The salt draws out the juice, and the juice is the whole point. You ate it standing at the sink or out on the porch, and you didn't bother with a plate. A tomato sandwich in August cost next to nothing and tasted like the entire summer had been building toward that single bite. Sardines on crackers represented pantry cooking at its most practical, requiring nothing more than opening a tin and arranging contents on whatever crackers were at hand. For seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s, this combination offered complete protein and essential oils without any cooking whatsoever. The tiny fish came packed in oil, water, or mustard sauce depending on preference, and a single tin stretched across 2 meals when appetite was small. Saltine crackers were the traditional base, their neutral flavor providing contrast to the rich, briny fish. Some seniors added lemon juice or hot sauce to brighten flavors. Others mashed the sardines with a fork, creating a spread that distributed more evenly. The entire meal cost pennies and provided nutrients doctors recommended for aging bodies. Sardines on crackers were consumed at kitchen tables by people who understood that dignity in dining came from adequacy, not extravagance. Hot spiced fruit compote was the warm side dish that grandmothers assembled from canned fruits transformed by butter, brown sugar, and Christmas spices into something that tasted homemade and special. Canned peach halves, pear halves, pineapple rings, and maraschino cherries were drained and arranged in baking dishes, then dotted with butter and sprinkled with brown sugar, cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg. 10 minutes under the broiler or in a hot oven caramelized the sugar into a glossy glaze while warming the fruits through. The compote was served hot alongside ham or turkey, its sweetness complementing savory meats while its warmth contrasted with cold salads and relishes. Grandmothers who wanted extra richness added a splash of rum or brandy before baking, the alcohol burning off while leaving behind its warm flavor. Hot spiced fruit compote proved that canned goods, when treated with creativity and care, could become memorable holiday dishes. Corn fritters with maple drizzle were pure Southern comfort, a 10-minute bridge between hunger and happiness. Corn, fresh or canned, was folded into a light batter of flour, egg, and milk, then dropped into a hot cast-iron skillet where it sizzled and rose into golden pillows. The outside crisped, the inside stayed soft, catching the faint sweetness of the corn. When drizzled with maple syrup, it became something transcendent. Sweet, savory, and nostalgic, all at once. The joy of cooking called them a luncheon for all hours, and they lived up to that promise. They appeared at kitchen tables, church picnics, and roadside stands, eaten hot from paper towels, while steam still curled into the air. Some cooks added green onion or bacon, others kept them plain, letting simplicity shine. Corn fritters with maple drizzle captured the rhythm of everyday cooking, fast, generous, and full of soul. They were food made to be shared, to be gone too soon. Pumpkin-shaped sugar cookies were pure joy dressed in frosting. You rolled out the dough from a boxed mix, cut it with pumpkin-shaped cutters, and baked until golden at the edges. The kitchen filled with that warm, buttery smell that every kid recognized instantly. Once they cooled, the fun began. Thick orange frosting, green stems, and wild little smiles drawn with black icing. Every cookie looked like it came from a different pumpkin patch. They were messy, bright, and absolutely perfect. Kids decorated them with full concentration, tongues sticking out, hands covered in sugar. They tasted like childhood, soft, sweet, and slightly crisp on the edges. Parents loved them because they were easy. Kids loved them because they were theirs. The counter turned into a rainbow of frosting bowls and crumbs. Even after the cookies were gone, the smell lingered, cozy and happy. They were Halloween joy in edible form, the kind of treat that never lasted long enough. Quick lima bean puree was the kind of side dish that took no more than 10 minutes but felt like it took some planning. You opened a can of lima beans, gave them a rinse, and then mashed them smooth with a little butter, salt, and pepper. If you had garlic or parsley, you could throw that in too. Some people added a splash of vinegar or lemon juice just to brighten things up. It could be served warm, like mashed potatoes, or cold as a spread on toast or crackers. What made it so special was how versatile it was. You could dress it up or down depending on what was around. For working-class homes and rural kitchens, this was one of those dishes that always showed up on the table because it was dependable, nutritious, and incredibly cheap. Lima beans were a pantry staple, and this method of turning them into something soft and seasoned made them more appealing to picky eaters too. It was fast, filling, and easy to make in batches. When you needed something hearty without the weight, this little mashup saved the day. Fried bologna, sandwich with mustard, brought quick satisfaction to tired working families who needed a hot dinner without fuss. Thick slices of bologna were scored so they curled as they hit a sizzling cast-iron skillet, filling the kitchen with a smoky aroma that signaled something good was minutes away. While the bologna browned, slices of white bread were lightly toasted and brushed with butter for extra flavor. A generous swipe of yellow mustard added tang, and some cooks layered in thin slices of onion or a single leaf of crisp lettuce if they had it. The heat from the skillet gave the meat a crisp edge and a savory depth that transformed a humble cold cut into a hearty main course. Children loved the salty, slightly sweet taste and the way the sandwich stayed warm as they carried it to the table. Parents loved that dinner was ready before the evening news began. It was fast, filling, and cheap. Everything a working household needed at the end of a long day. Even today, one bite of that hot sandwich can summon memories of late nights, hard work, and the comfort of a meal that respected both time and appetite. This was not just a baked bean and hot dog dinner. This was the working family's answer to hunger, chaos, and a kitchen clock that never slowed down. Grandma would take a can of baked beans, thick, sweet, and molasses dark, and heat it slowly on the stove. Then came the franks, sliced into coins and tossed in until they plumped up like little balloons. Sometimes she would add a spoonful of brown sugar or a shake of mustard, but most nights she just stirred and served. It was hot, sticky, smoky, and completely effortless. The beans coated the franks like syrup over pancakes, and it went best with a buttered slice of toast or a side of cornbread if the oven was already warm. Kids would gobble it down in minutes. Grown-ups would sigh, eat quietly, and go back for seconds. It was the kind of stovetop magic that made do with what you had and somehow made it taste better than it should. You never forgot the smell. And even if you rolled your eyes when she made it, you would ask for it again once life got harder and you needed something easy. That is what made it a keeper. There really is nothing like a grilled cheese sandwich, a meal that you have seen in the media, in kitchens, all over neighborhoods, in stalls and diners, and just about everywhere else. Sometimes you are in too much of a rush to make anything proper, or you just might only have some cheese and bread on hand. Everyone still needs to eat, but does that mean we have to wash down something we do not even like the taste of? No! And the popularity of grilled cheese sandwiches is a testament to that. But how did these sandwiches get so popular? Well, most Americans can only remember them as a loving meal that their grandmother would make in times exactly like what we described. The best part is that regardless of what kind of bread or cheese you like, every combo works just as well, which is something we cannot say about many dishes. Number 14, bologna and cheese sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a slice of bologna, a slice of American cheese, a smear of mustard. That was the lunch that built working-class America and then retired with it. Oscar Mayer bologna cost $2.49 a package in 2024 and contained enough slices for 8 sandwiches. That was 31 cents per meal before the bread and cheese. Factory workers in Detroit and Cleveland and Gary ate this every day for 30 years, then kept eating it in retirement because the taste was wired into them. It was not nostalgia, it was neurological. The flavor of cold bologna on soft bread with yellow mustard triggered something that no restaurant meal could replicate. For a senior living alone, this sandwich was less than 5 minutes from start to finish, required no heat, no cleanup beyond a plate, and tasted exactly the same every single time. That predictability was not boring. It was safe. In a world where everything else was changing and falling away, the bologna sandwich stayed exactly where you left it. The economics of meals like this one tell a story that the food industry would rather you did not hear. A package of bologna, a loaf of bread, and a block of cheese cost under $7 together and fed a person for a week. A single frozen dinner from the same grocery store cost $4 and lasted one night. The math was not complicated, but the frozen dinner had a commercial and a colorful box and a place in the freezer section at eye level. The bologna was on the bottom shelf. The beans were in the back aisle. The oats were wherever the store decided to hide them. These meals survived not because of marketing, but in spite of it. The cheapest, most nutritious foods in America are the ones with the smallest advertising budgets and the lowest profit margins. That is not an accident. It is a business model that depends on seniors not knowing what a can of beans and a slice of bread can actually do. Number 16, fried bologna sandwich. A pound of Sally's bologna cost $1.49 in 1979. A single slice cost about 9 cents. Frank cut 4 shallow slits into the edge of the slice so it would not dome up on the electric coil. A trick he had learned from his brother Sal, who worked the lunch counter at the old Stouffer's downtown for 18 years. The slits let the heat through. The bologna lay flat, crisped at the edges, turned the color of burnt copper. 2 slices of white bread, a swipe of yellow mustard. 4 minutes. Some people called it a poor man's steak, but Frank called it Tuesday. There was no shame in it, and anyone who thought there was had never stood in front of a single burner on a gray afternoon in February, with the radio on low and the dog already fed. Red-eye gravy required exactly 2 things: country ham and black coffee, the stronger the better. You fried the ham, pulled it out, poured a cup of dark coffee over the hot drippings, and scraped the browned bits loose as it hissed. 3 minutes. Done. Some people in Appalachia called it red sop, and the name came from the reddish ring the coffee and fat left at the skillet's edge, darker on the outside, lighter in the center, like an eye. Country ham had been a staple in Virginia and the Mountain South since colonial times, and the tradition of deglazing ham drippings with coffee likely came from Scots-Irish settlers who wasted nothing and never saw a reason to change. You poured it over grits or biscuits, and the bitterness of the coffee cut the salt and fat in a way that shouldn't have worked, but absolutely did. But the quick suppers didn't end with ham. Beneath all that smoky pork lay a whole world of mountain resourcefulness, where garden scraps and foraged food and vegetables nobody else wanted carried as much weight as any cut of meat. Milk toast was the meal your grandmother made when the world had worn her down. Warm milk poured over buttered toast, sometimes with sugar, sometimes with just salt, and the silence of an empty kitchen. The dish first appeared in American cookbooks around 1840, and by 1896, Fanny Farmer had it listed in the Boston Cooking School cookbook under Feeding the Sick. But it was never just for the sick. It was for the tired, the lonely, the ones who didn't have the energy to cook a real supper but still needed something warm before bed. MFK Fisher called it a warm, mild, soothing thing, full of innocent strength. You tore the bread by hand. You heated the milk until it barely steamed. You sat in a kitchen that used to hold a whole family and ate something that cost almost nothing and somehow still felt like enough. Toast with bacon drippings carried the rich memory of breakfast into evening meals, using saved fat that thrifty households never discarded. During the 1940s through 70s, seniors understood that bacon grease collected in jars beside the stove was liquid gold for flavoring and spreading. A slice of bread was toasted until golden, then spread while warm with a thin layer of cool drippings seasoned with salt from countless previous cookings. The fat melted slightly into warm bread, creating savory richness that satisfied hunger and stretched resources. Some seniors sprinkled their dripping toast with black pepper or topped it with tomato slices when gardens were producing. The flavor was deeply porky, slightly smoky, and wholly comforting to those who remembered when nothing edible was ever thrown away. This single slice often served as complete supper when appetites were small. Toast with bacon drippings represented waste-nothing kitchens where every ingredient served multiple purposes. Pickled watermelon rind appeared in cut glass dishes at Southern Christmas tables, a sweet tart condiment that grandmothers put up in summer but could also make quickly from store-bought jars enhanced with extra spices. Those who bought prepared rinds would simmer them briefly with additional cinnamon sticks, whole cloves, and a splash of vinegar to make them taste homemade. The translucent pale green pieces glistened like jewels, their texture crisp tender, and their flavor an unexpected combination of sweetness and pickle tang. Grandmothers served them alongside ham and turkey as a palate cleanser, their brightness cutting through rich meats and heavy gravies. The rinds connected Christmas tables to summer gardens and the waste-nothing philosophy that defined earlier generations. Even families who hadn't grown their own watermelons appreciated this old-fashioned condiment that seemed fancy but cost very little. Pickled watermelon rind proved that resourcefulness and flavor could coexist beautifully on holiday tables. Eggs a la goldenrod was one of those quietly elegant dishes that proved how far a single egg could go. Hard-boiled eggs were chopped into a creamy white sauce made from butter, flour, and milk, seasoned just enough to feel comforting without being heavy. The golden yolks were pressed through a sieve and sprinkled on top like sunshine. It was ladled generously over buttered toast, warm and simple, but it felt refined enough to serve guests. Housewives swore by it for its thrift and speed, 10 minutes from pan to plate. The recipe appeared in early editions of The Joy of Cooking as a way to turn breakfast into something special without fuss or waste. It was food for busy mornings, for children before school, or for quiet dinners when money was tight. Even with such basic ingredients, it had an air of ceremony, a touch of care. The smell of warm milk and butter filled the kitchen like a soft promise. It was a reminder that nourishment could be beautiful when made with love and patience. Rice Krispies marshmallow squares were a miracle of convenience and taste. All you needed was butter, marshmallows, and cereal, the holy trinity of fast treats. Moms melted marshmallows on the stove, stirred in the Rice Krispies, and pressed the sticky mixture into pans while kids hovered impatiently nearby. The smell of butter and sugar filled every corner of the kitchen. They were soft at first, chewy after cooling, and snapped perfectly when you bit in. They looked plain but sparkled in their simplicity. No frosting, no decoration, just sweet golden joy. Some kids added candy bits or drizzled chocolate on top, but the classic version was always king. They showed up at every school party and neighborhood potluck, sometimes wrapped in foil, sometimes stacked in Tupperware that no one ever got back. Cheap, quick, and foolproof, these treats felt like magic pulled from thin air. The marshmallow squares became the trademark of the 70s mom ingenuity, sweetness born from whatever was in the pantry. Milk toast was a warm hug in a bowl. If you grew up in a modest household during the 1920s, there is a good chance this was your breakfast, or your supper, at least once a week. You started by lightly toasting plain white bread, laying the slices in a shallow dish, and then pouring scalded milk over the top until it's soaked through. A pat of butter on top, maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon or sugar if you were lucky, and that was it. Just like that, you had a soft, custardy dish that soothed upset stomachs, filled empty bellies, and made the best use of simple ingredients. This was not food meant to impress. It was food that made do, quiet, gentle, and easy to love if you grew up with it. Many families relied on milk toast during illness or hard times. Doctors even recommended it for patients recovering from fevers or stomach bugs, calling it light but sustaining. What today might sound like soggy toast was once a go-to comfort meal. And if you were a child waking up to a cold kitchen and an even colder world outside, a bowl of warm milk toast felt like safety itself. Ham and cheese biscuit sandwiches turned leftovers into a satisfying handheld meal that tasted like a weekend treat even on the busiest night. Flaky biscuits baked from a can or quickly mixed from scratch rose high in the oven while slices of baked ham warmed in a skillet. As soon as the biscuits were golden, they were split open and layered with the savory ham and slices of sharp cheddar or mild American cheese. A few minutes back in the warm oven melted the cheese into a gooey blanket that glued everything together. The salty ham, buttery biscuit, and rich cheese made a perfect combination that required no side dish and no long wait. For families coming home late, this sandwich was both supper and comfort, a way to turn yesterday's roast into tonight's fast feast. Children grabbed them hot from the tray, and the memory of that warm bite remains an echo of efficiency and home-style pleasure. Quick tomato and rice soup was less of a recipe and more of a family habit. It started with canned tomato soup, the kind that came in a red and white can and waited patiently in your pantry for its moment. Instead of milk or water, Grandma would stir in leftover rice from the night before, just a scoop or two, enough to bulk it up and stretch it across the whole table. The rice gave it body, the soup gave it flavor, and together they made something more than the sum of their parts. It simmered on the stove while she folded laundry or paid bills at the kitchen table. It was the smell that told you dinner was ready, not the clock. No one complained that it was simple. In fact, that was the point. You could top it with cheese, swirl in a bit of cream, or eat it plain with saltines on the side. Whatever the case, it went down smooth, warmed you up fast, and made a long day feel less heavy. It might not win any ribbons, but it won over every empty stomach it ever met. Buttered noodles are a dish so strongly associated with the elderly that they even have another name. Introducing Grandma's noodles, which were a staple of any family gathering back when simple dishes like this were still enough to leave a great impression on everyone at the table. The eggs made you feel great because they added a very warm feeling to the dish, as well as being great for you. The butter itself was just the right touch that the dish needed and brought out the chewy sensation of the noodles so much more, and the overall flavor was something a mix between creamy chicken noodles and chicken cooked in butter, shredded and diced with vegetables. It screamed love in every sense of the word because it was a dish that took effort and, more than anything else, a lot of attention to detail to nail. But if that's the job, then there's no one better for it than the grandmas of the country. Number 23. Cottage cheese and canned peaches. This was the meal that women of a certain generation called a salad. It was not a salad. It was a scoop of cottage cheese dropped onto a plate beside a mound of canned peach halves drained from a 79-cent can. That was the entire preparation. No heat, no stirring, no standing. A half cup of cottage cheese delivered 14 grams of protein and was soft enough for seniors with dental problems to eat without struggle. The peaches added sweetness and vitamin C. Hospital cafeterias served this exact combination on trays to patients recovering from surgery in the 1960s and 1970s because it required no chewing and no digestion effort. For a senior living alone, it was the meal you made when you did not feel like eating, but knew you had to. It asked nothing of you. It just sat there on the plate, waiting. Weight Watchers put cottage cheese and fruit on its approved list in 1963, and an entire generation of American women never stopped eating it. Number 14. Pan-fried pierogi and onion. The Hill District had a Polish corner for 80 years. On Webster Avenue, old women rolled dough every Wednesday afternoon in the basement of St. Stanislaus Parish and sold them for 50 cents a dozen, frozen, in brown paper bags. Frank bought 2 dozen at a time and kept them in the icebox. A tablespoon of butter, half an onion sliced paper thin. Brown the onions first. Drop 6 frozen pierogi in, lid on, 5 minutes. Flip, 5 more. The potato and cheese filling went hot without the dough falling apart, the way it did if you boiled them. Sour cream on top. He ate them at the table, not the counter. On the one night of the week, he used a plate and a cloth napkin. Wednesday, because that was the day the old women made them, and a man could mark a week by the smell of butter and onion if he had nothing else left to mark it by. The dozen cost him 50 cents, which came out to about 4 cents per pierogi, cheaper than a candy bar at the Rite Aid on Fifth Avenue. The foreman at the mill had once told Frank that food eaten on a cloth napkin tasted better than food eaten on paper. Frank had laughed at the time. 30 years later, alone in a row house kitchen on a Wednesday night, he understood what the old foreman had meant. The napkin was not about the food. It was about the small act of setting a place for yourself and keeping it set. White half-runner beans were not the beans you bought at a grocery store. They were a specific Appalachian heirloom variety, a pole bean with a creamy white hull and a green runner, developed over generations by mountain gardeners in the region, stretching from southwestern Virginia through eastern Tennessee and into western North Carolina. They grew on poles. They had to be strung and broken by hand, and the children old enough to sit still were expected to help. They cooked faster than dried pintos and tasted different, earthier, starchier, with a flavor that people from outside the region found hard to describe and people from inside recognized instantly as home. You put them in a pot with fatback and water, brought them to a boil, and let them go until they were soft enough to mash with your tongue. You didn't time it. You tasted. The seeds were passed between families the way recipes should be. No paperwork, just a jar over the fence in the fall. When families stopped growing gardens, the half-runner slipped away with them. Sardines on crackers turned a tin that cost less than a quarter into a meal that could carry you through the afternoon. During the 30s and 40s, canned sardines were among the cheapest protein in the country. Shelf-stable, no cooking required, ready the moment you peeled back the lid with that little key. The joy of cooking included sardine toast recipes by 1943, treating them not as a last resort but as a proper, quick supper. You laid them across saltines or Ritz crackers, maybe with a squeeze of lemon or a dot of mustard. The old ones never rinsed them. That was how you could tell someone who actually ate sardines from someone who was only pretending. After the war, when fresh meat became affordable again, sardines quietly slid from necessity to eccentricity. But in apartments across the country, widows and widowers still open that same flat tin for supper, standing at the counter with a sleeve of crackers, eating the way they always have. Buttered noodles satisfied hunger with the simplest combination of starch, fat, and salt, asking nothing of the cook beyond boiling water. Seniors living alone during the 1960s and 70s kept boxes of egg noodles in their pantries for evenings when cooking felt like too much, but hunger insisted on attention. The noodles were boiled until tender, drained thoroughly, then returned to the warm pot where butter was added along with generous salt and pepper. The butter melted into warm pasta, coating each strand with glossy richness that tasted more indulgent than ingredients suggested. Some added dried parsley for color or grated cheese when budget allowed. The entire preparation took under 10 minutes and produced a bowl of comfort that filled empty stomachs without taxing limited energy. Buttered noodles were honest food that never pretended to be more than what they were. For seniors eating alone, this simple dish provided warmth on nights when elaborate cooking was impossible. Creamed pearl onions brought old-world elegance to American Christmas tables through a preparation so simple it bordered on effortless yet tasted utterly luxurious. Grandmothers relied on jars of pre-peeled pearl onions that eliminated the tedious work of blanching and skinning dozens of tiny bulbs by hand. The onions were drained and warmed in a quick cream sauce made from butter, flour, and milk whisked together until smooth and thickened. A pinch of nutmeg, the secret ingredient that distinguished good creamed onions from ordinary, added warmth without announcing its presence. The finished dish was silky and mild, the sweet onions suspended in sauce that coated each one in creamy richness. Children who found raw onions too sharp often discovered they loved these gentle, butter-soft morsels, swimming in their mild sauce. Creamed pearl onions represented the quiet sophistication of mid-century holiday cooking, where simplicity and convenience met elegance on every table. Creamed mushrooms on crackers was the kind of dish that came together faster than guests could arrive, the perfect mix of grace and resourcefulness. A few spoonfuls of butter melted in a pan, a dusting of flour turned it thick, and milk smoothed it into something velvety. Sliced mushrooms followed, softening as they released their earthy aroma. The sauce simmered just long enough to turn glossy before being spooned over crisp crackers or buttered toast. In the 1940s and 1950s, this was elegant entertaining, simple ingredients dressed in charm. The joy of cooking called it a supper in miniature, perfect for evenings when friends dropped by unannounced. Housewives loved it because it looked refined yet cost little, using what was already in the pantry. The flavor balanced richness and simplicity, each bite creamy with a hint of woodland flavor. Served with martinis or lemonade, it fit every occasion. Creamed mushrooms on crackers reminded cooks that true hospitality was never about extravagance. It was about warmth, speed, and heart. Caramel apples were both a delight and a dare. You started with crisp green apples, skewered on wooden sticks, dipped into a pan of molten caramel that glistened like amber glass. The air smelled of sugar and spice, and the moment they cooled, the trouble began. They were sticky, glossy, and stubborn. Your teeth fought them, your fingers glued together, but no one cared. They were the centerpiece of every Halloween fair and school carnival. Sometimes they came rolled in crushed nuts, sometimes left plain and perfect. They were messy, unapologetic, and absolutely worth it. Parents wrapped them in cellophane, tied with ribbons, and handed them out like edible trophies. The sound of that first crack, when your teeth broke the caramel shell, was pure satisfaction. Kids licked caramel off their hands, faces, even elbows, laughing while trying to finish before the apple hit the floor. They were part candy, part memory, and completely irresistible. Pickled tongue on crackers may not sound like 10-minute food, but hear me out. The tongue itself was pickled ahead of time, sliced deli thin and kept chilled, usually in brine or vinegar. When it came time to eat, all you had to do was lay a few slices on buttered crackers or small toast rounds. That was it. No cooking, no fuss. Just a quick savory bite, served cold, with a flavor that leaned into sharp and salty. Beef tongue was not always considered awful in the 1920s. It was just another cut of meat. It showed up in sandwiches, soups, and yes, on crackers. Pickling it preserved the meat for longer periods and made it shelf-stable in homes that lacked strong refrigeration. It was often sliced so thin you could see the light through it, and that made a little go a long way. When paired with a dab of mustard or horseradish, it became a bite that was as bold as it was fast. Not everyone loved it, but the people who did swore by it. In a world where nothing could go to waste, even a tongue could become a delicacy, served in less than 10 minutes. Patty melt on rye delivered diner flavor in a fraction of the time, making it a favorite among families who craved something special after a long shift. Ground beef was quickly shaped into thin patties and pressed flat on a hot griddle until sizzling and browned. Meanwhile, onions sliced paper-thin softened in butter until golden and sweet, their aroma drifting through the kitchen. Slices of rye bread were spread with more butter, then layered with the beef, the onions, and generous slices of melty Swiss or American cheese. A few minutes back on the skillet brought everything together, the bread crisping as the cheese oozed around the edges. The result was a sandwich that tasted like a full diner meal, yet came together faster than any takeout order. Served with pickles or a handful of chips, the patty melt satisfied both hunger and the need for something comforting, proving that a fast dinner could still feel like a small luxury at the end of a demanding day. There were two things nearly every kitchen had back then: creamed corn and hot dogs. When both of them landed in the same skillet, dinner was practically done. This was the kind of meal Grandma made when time was short and kids were restless. She would slice the hot dogs into little coins and toss them into a buttered pan until they browned just right around the edges. Then came the creamed corn, thick, sweet, and silky from the can. It all got mixed together into a bubbling, golden mess that looked questionable to some but tasted like warm security. You could eat it on its own, spoon it over bread, or mop it up with the last slice of toast from breakfast. Nobody called it gourmet, but everyone called it dinner. It filled your belly, cleaned out the pantry, and gave you one less thing to worry about. And somehow, it was the meal that lingered in memory more than any roast or fancy casserole. Maybe it was the smell. Maybe it was how fast it came together. Or maybe it was just that it tasted better when you were young, hungry, and too impatient to wait for something fancier. Who could ever resist pancakes? Since we are visiting the all-time classics which last even today in almost every child's diet and life, it would be a crime to go without mentioning Grandma's beloved fluffy pancakes. Did you ever wonder what made hers so much fluffier? Pancake houses across the nation seemingly met their match when confronted with a 60-something-year-old grandmother who loves to spend time obsessing over her grandkids. So what is it that home chefs discovered that several brands and franchises could not? There are a few tricks they would use, like letting the egg whites relax in the batter before cooking them, or having impeccable flipping skills so just the right amount of heat gets to each side. Some would just whisk and beat their eggs and batter so well that you got one supremely thick stack of pancakes. It seems the secret was simply the years of pancake-making experience that are hard to replicate. Number 20. Canned chili over crackers. A can of Hormel chili cost $1.79. A sleeve of saltine crackers cost $1.29 and lasted a month. You opened the can, heated it in a bowl in the microwave for 90 seconds, and crumbled crackers on top. That was dinner. The chili had 15 grams of protein per can. The crackers gave it crunch and made the portion feel bigger than it was. Truck stops across Oklahoma, and Texas sold this combination for $2.99 in the 1980s. Retired truckers who missed the road kept eating it at home because the taste was the same and the price was right. For a senior with limited mobility, the microwave was the only tool required. No stove, no flame, no standing. You could make this sitting in a kitchen chair. Hormel introduced its canned chili in 1935, marketing it as a convenience food for busy families. By the 1970s, the company was selling 50 million cans a year. Number 25. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Every Army cook in America knew this dish by heart, long before Frank Delmonico learned it from his father-in-law in 1947. The 1910 Manual for Army Cooks printed the recipe in the back. Soldiers called it SOS. Civilians called it supper. A small jar of Armour dried beef cost about 70 cents at the A&P in 1979. Butter, flour, milk, pepper. Frank melted 2 tablespoons of butter in the Farberware pan, sprinkled in the flour to make a roux, poured the milk in slow while the wooden spoon never stopped moving. The dried beef went in last, torn by hand. 8 minutes from cold stove to plated. He ate it over 2 slices of Mancini's bread, standing at the counter. Here is what most people miss about this dish. It was not the chipped beef that mattered. It was the roux. A man who could make a roux at 74 still had control over something in his kitchen. A roux was a small sovereignty. You did not need a chair for a 10-minute meal. You needed a plate and enough light to see the watch. But the roux was the proof you still knew what you were doing. Frank's father-in-law had told him that in 1947, standing at a different stove, and Frank had not forgotten it. Hominy is corn soaked in an alkaline solution, wood ash, lye, or slaked lime, until the outer hull loosens and the kernel becomes something entirely different, a process called nixtamalization that the Cherokee and other Native American nations had practiced for centuries before European settlers arrived in the Appalachian Mountains and learned it from them. The alkaline treatment unlocked niacin that dried corn could not release on its own, and the settlers who adopted it kept their families healthier without knowing exactly why. By the 1950s, most Appalachian families got their hominy from a can. Van Camp's was the brand most kitchens stocked, warming it in a skillet with butter and cracked black pepper. Old-timers remembered when it was supper itself, heaped into a bowl, eaten hot enough to steam. The flavor was different from grits, blunter and chewier, and anyone who grew up eating it never confused the two. It was its own thing, and the people who understood that distinction are mostly gone. Welsh rarebit turned bread and cheese into something that almost passed for a real dinner, and for decades it rescued Americans who opened the refrigerator and found close to nothing. The dish traces to Hannah Glass's The Art of Cookery in 1747, where it appeared as Welsh rabbit. The dark joke being that families too poor for actual rabbit ate melted cheese instead. By the 1940s, it was a lunch counter fixture. Cheddar melted with a splash of ale, dry mustard, a few drops of Worcestershire, poured thick over toast. Stouffer's later sold a frozen version that moved millions of units, and whole generations grew up knowing that orange sauce as the weeknight rescue. One saucepan, one burner, whatever cheese was on hand, and under 10 minutes from a cold kitchen to a full plate. For a widower who never learned more than a handful of dishes, rarebit was a meal that felt respectable, warm, filling, and decent enough to sit down for, even when only one chair was pulled from the table. Stewed tomatoes on toast brought garden flavor to supper tables using canned tomatoes that cost pennies and required almost no preparation. Seniors who had canned their own tomatoes during summer or purchased store brands during lean times understood this humble ingredient's versatility. The tomatoes were heated in a small saucepan with butter, salt, sugar, and sometimes torn bread pieces that thickened the liquid into something approaching sauce. This warm mixture was spooned over buttered toast that soaked up the juices gratefully. The combination provided vitamins, fiber, and comfort of something warm and savory. Some seniors added black pepper or Worcestershire sauce to deepen flavors. Others kept things simple, letting tomatoes speak for themselves. The dish appeared on tables across America during decades when making do meant making delicious from almost nothing. Stewed tomatoes on toast proved that a can of tomatoes and bread slice could become something worth sitting down to eat properly. Buttered peas with pearl onions was the elegant side dish that appeared on countless Christmas tables despite taking barely 5 minutes to prepare from start to finish. Grandmothers kept bags of frozen peas and jars of pearl onions in their pantries specifically for holiday meals, knowing this combination looked fancy enough for company. The preparation was simple. Heat the peas according to package directions, drain the pearl onions and warm them through. Then toss everything together with a generous pat of butter and a sprinkle of salt. The butter melted into a glossy coating that made the bright green peas glisten alongside the pale, sweet onions. Some grandmothers added a pinch of sugar to enhance the natural sweetness, while others finished with a dusting of white pepper for subtle warmth. The dish could sit in a warm oven while other foods finished cooking. Children who normally avoided vegetables often accepted this combination because the buttery sweetness made it feel like a treat. Ham and pineapple foldovers were the decade's love letter to sweet and savory living. Thin slices of ham were topped with pineapple rings, brushed with mustard, and broiled on bread or biscuit halves until the edges crisped. The result was warm, tangy, and quick, a meal fit for both lunch and company. The Joy of Cooking listed it as a 10-minute sandwich, perfect for unexpected guests or late-night suppers. It was food that wore a smile, bright, colorful, unapologetically mid-century. The pineapple's sweetness met the salty ham in perfect balance, every bite delivering nostalgia in flavor form. These sandwiches sat proudly on holiday tables and weekday trays alike, their simplicity making them timeless. A sprinkle of grated cheese on top made them even better, melting into golden bubbles. It was fast food before the term existed, homemade and proud. Each foldover told the story of an era that loved flair without the wait. Monster Face cupcakes were the masterpiece of every hurried Halloween mom. A box of yellow cake mix, a few tubs of frosting, and a handful of candy turned into an edible art project. Once the cupcakes cooled, the real fun began. Kids got spoons, plastic knives, and an explosion of food coloring to create their sugary monsters. Gummy worms became mouths, candy buttons turned into wild eyes, and licorice laces doubled as creepy hair. No two monsters ever looked the same. Some funny, some scary, all covered in way too much frosting. The table always ended up a colorful mess, laughter echoing through the room. Parents pretended to supervise but mostly joined in, licking frosting off their fingers. They were the perfect last-minute dessert. No perfection needed, only imagination. The cupcakes became more than food. They were memories with sprinkles. They may have looked monstrous, but they tasted like childhood. Maple cream sandwiches were dessert on a dime. All you needed was graham crackers, a bit of maple-flavored frosting or whipped cream, and a few minutes to assemble. Spread the filling between 2 crackers, press them together, and chill if time allows. That was it. No baking, no pans, just a sugar fix made from pantry staples. Maple syrup was not rare in the 1920s, especially in the Northeast, where small producers tapped trees each spring. Imitation maple flavoring also became popular and cheap. These sandwiches were common in homes that needed dessert without making a pie or cake. They were crisp, sweet, and small enough that you could have 2 or 3 without guilt. Sometimes they were topped with powdered sugar or chocolate, but the original needed no extras. It was proof that a good treat did not need much, just a little creativity and a sweet tooth. Creamed peas on toast turned a bag of frozen peas and a little flour into a fast dinner that warmed the evening. Butter melted in a skillet while a spoonful of flour was whisked in to make a smooth roux. Then milk streamed in to form a creamy sauce. The peas went straight from freezer to pan, bright green against the pale gravy as they softened and released their sweetness. Thick slices of bread toasted in the same pan or under a quick broiler became the foundation, soaking up the sauce while staying crisp at the edges. A sprinkle of black pepper and a pinch of nutmeg gave the dish surprising depth, proof that simple pantry ingredients could still feel indulgent. Families loved how it filled plates in less than 10 minutes and cost almost nothing, making it a dependable weeknight standby. Children liked the mild flavor and the fun of cutting through the soft bread with a fork, while adults found comfort in its quiet, creamy richness. One bite carried the memory of suppers built on thrift and ingenuity, a reminder that speed and satisfaction can share the same plate when time and money are scarce, but hunger is real. Bologna and egg scramble was the go-to dinner when breakfast never quite happened and lunch was already a blur. It started with slices of bologna, thick and pink and curled at the edges, hitting the hot pan with a sizzle. Grandma would brown them until they crisped at the edges, then crack in a few eggs and give it all a quick scramble. No measuring, no garnish, just protein and grease and flavor. Sometimes she would add a little shredded cheese if she had some, but it was not necessary. This was about getting food on the table without making it a project. The bologna gave the eggs a smoky, salty edge, and the eggs softened everything just enough to go down easy. Served in bowls, over toast, or straight from the skillet, no one ever walked away hungry. It was simple, dependable, and tasted a whole lot fancier than it had any right to. You could make it in 10 minutes, clean up in 5, and be done with the day before the sun went down. Some meals were special because they were rare. This one was special because it was always there. There are times where you just absolutely do not feel like getting up and doing anything. And in those times, microwaving some mac and cheese can be really helpful. We are sure most of us have memories of spending the nights at our grandparents' and waking up to some mac and cheese in the microwave, or coming home from school to a bowl that you could lose your worries in. The cheesier it was, the happier a kid would be after eating it. And even at this adult stage of life, a hot bowl can bring all those memories flooding right back in. Mac and cheese started growing in popularity when Mississippi farm families adopted it as a regular meal, and from there onwards it spread to a lot of families everywhere across the states. We thank God for that little fact every day, since we do not know what we would do without it. Number 25. Sardines on toast. In 1943, The Joy of Cooking printed a recipe for sardine toast that cost less than a dime. 80 years later, the meal still works the same way. You opened a tin, laid the fish across a piece of toast, and ate it over the sink or at the table. That was the whole production. A tin of sardines cost 89 cents at most grocery stores in 2024. One tin had 23 grams of protein and more calcium than a glass of milk because of the soft bones packed inside. Seniors who ate sardines regularly were getting omega-3 fatty acids that most Americans pay $30 a month for in supplement form. Fishermen's wives in Gloucester, Massachusetts ate sardine toast for lunch every day through the 1950s and 1960s. They did not call it a health food. They called it Tuesday. For a senior with shaking hands, there was no knife work, no cooking, no heat required. You pulled the tab, you spread the fish, you ate. Done. Number 19. American goulash. Not Hungarian goulash. American. The difference mattered. The first recipe for this dish appeared in a 1910 American cookbook under the name chop suey with ground beef, macaroni, and tomatoes. By the 1970s, Chef Boyardee had commercialized it in a can, and grandmothers across the Midwest rolled their eyes and kept making it the right way. Frank's version was a quarter pound of ground beef browned in the Farberware pan, a can of stewed tomatoes poured over it, a handful of elbow macaroni dropped in raw, the pasta cooked in the tomato juice. 8 minutes. Lid on. One pan, one plate, no colander to wash. He ate it with a heel of bread and remembered Sunday afternoons at his mother-in-law's kitchen in Bloomfield, when the same dish fed 9 cousins. Fatback had no glamour. It was the part of the hog nobody else wanted. Pure white fat salted and stored in a crock. But in Appalachian kitchens from the 1930s through the 1960s, it was the engine of every meal. You sliced it thin, laid it in a cold skillet, and let it render slow. By the time the slices went brown and rigid at the edges, the pan was full of clear golden fat worth more than the meat itself. The crackling slices got eaten, salty, crunchy, intensely porky, but the drippings went into a jar by the stove that was never empty if the family was doing all right. A half-pound of fatback cost a few cents at the company store in coal towns across West Virginia and eastern Kentucky. and it seasoned every pot of beans, every skillet of greens, every pan of cornbread for a month. You didn't measure. You poured until the color looked right, and if you had to ask what that meant, you hadn't spent enough time watching. The jar by the stove was the first thing to disappear when the next generation moved to town. Cinnamon sugar toast required nothing but bread, butter, a spoonful of sugar, and a shake of cinnamon. Yet the old cooks made it like it mattered. The secret was the broiler. Anyone could sprinkle sugar on buttered toast, but only the ones who knew slid it under the flame until the sugar bubbled and cracked into a thin, caramelized shell. You had maybe 30 seconds between perfect and ruined. During the Depression, when a loaf of white bread cost a nickel and cinnamon was one of the few spices most kitchens kept, this was the cheapest treat a child could hope for. By the 1960s, it was the after-school snack in nearly every American home, the smell of burnt sugar and warm cinnamon hitting you before you even dropped your school bag. For the seniors who live alone now, that taste is a direct line back to a kitchen counter they once stood at, waiting. The person who handed them that plate is gone. The cinnamon is still in the cabinet. Bread and milk bowl was perhaps the oldest and simplest supper in the American pantry, dating back centuries and persisting through every economic hardship. Seniors who remembered harder times often returned to this dish when cooking seemed too effortful and appetites had shrunk with age. The preparation required nothing more than tearing bread into pieces, placing them in a bowl, and pouring cold or warm milk over the top. Sugar was sprinkled according to taste, transforming the humble combination into something approaching dessert. Some preferred their bread and milk warm, heating the milk gently before pouring. Others liked it cold, especially during summer months. The bread softened quickly, becoming easy to eat with a spoon, gentle on sensitive stomachs and aging teeth. This was food stripped to its essence. For seniors eating alone, bread and milk represented self-sufficiency and comfort of familiar flavors, asking nothing and giving everything a tired body needed. Marinated cucumber salad offered cool, crisp refreshment amid the heavy richness of typical Christmas fare, and grandmothers could prepare it in the time it took to slice vegetables and stir dressing together. Thin-sliced cucumbers went into bowls with equally thin onion rings. Then a simple marinade of vinegar, sugar, water, and salt was poured over to cover. Some grandmothers added sour cream for a creamier version, while others preferred the clarity of a simple vinegar dressing that let the cucumber flavor shine. The salad improved as it sat, the cucumbers releasing their liquid while absorbing the sweet tart dressing, though it remained delicious even when assembled just minutes before serving. Dill was the traditional herb addition, its feathery fronds both flavoring the salad and making it look like something from a fancy restaurant. Marinated cucumber salad reminded everyone that not every dish needed to be rich and heavy to earn its place on the holiday table. Tomato rarebit was comfort poured over toast. Imagine a smooth, cheese-rich sauce flavored with tomato, butter, and a pinch of mustard. Simple, warm, and filling. It was a cousin to Welsh rarebit, but humbler, faster, and easier to love. The joy of cooking tucked it among its light suppers, promising a full meal made in minutes. It was cooked in one pan, whisked until glossy, then ladled over slices of buttered bread or crackers. The result was creamy and tangy, with a sharpness that cut through the richness of cheese. It fit perfectly into the rhythms of everyday life, something to make after work or to stretch what was left in the icebox. Even when times were tight, this dish brought a touch of luxury to the table. The smell of tomato and melted cheese was like comfort distilled. Every bite carried the warmth of an era when simplicity was both necessity and art. Peanut butter cornflake clusters were where thrift met genius. A pot of peanut butter, corn syrup, and sugar turned humble cereal into chewy gold. You stirred until the mixture bubbled, then poured it over cornflakes, mixing fast before it hardened. Sticky, sweet, and crunchy, they were shaped by hand into little mounds that looked like sunshine. Kids loved them because they stuck to their fingers, and parents loved them because they used what was already in the pantry. They hardened just enough to keep their shape, the perfect bite of sweet and salt. Wrapped in wax paper or stacked in tins, they disappeared faster than anything else on the table. They were a staple at Halloween parties, easy to make between costumes and candy runs. Some added chocolate chips or drizzles, but even plain, they hit every craving. Cornflake clusters were proof that even the simplest ingredients could taste like celebration. They were quick, clever, and full of crunch. Homemade candy for people who did not need a recipe to make something right. Quick codfish hash was all about speed and salt. The fish came from a wooden box, salted and dried until it could last for weeks without refrigeration. You soaked it in hot water, flaked it into a pan, and fried it with diced potatoes or onions, whatever you had. No need to get fancy. Pantry to plate in 10 minutes. Codfish had long been a staple in coastal regions, but by the 1920s it had reached inland kitchens thanks to canning and trade. It was cheap, dependable, and packed with protein, everything a working family needed. Some added milk or cream to soften the hash, but most just used bacon grease or lard to crisp it. It had a strong smell and a stronger opinion. Either you loved it or you quietly skipped it. But it filled stomachs, no matter the hour. And if you had a seasoned cast iron skillet, that golden crust could make you forget just how bare the pantry really was. Cabbage and sausage fry-up offered big flavor and a full stomach with almost no preparation. Pre-cooked sausage slices hit the skillet first, releasing fat and spice that would season everything to come. Thin shreds of green cabbage followed, sizzling as they met the hot pan and softening into tender ribbons that soaked up the sausage drippings. A splash of vinegar or a pinch of red pepper flakes brightened the dish, while a quick toss brought everything together in less than 10 minutes. The combination of smoky meat and sweet cabbage made each bite taste richer than its humble ingredients suggested. Served alone or with a slice of bread, it filled plates and satisfied appetites without straining the grocery budget. Working families valued the ease, but they also loved the hearty, old-world flavor that reminded them of meals once cooked slowly, now captured in minutes. Ham and applesauce might sound fancy today, but back in the day, it was just something Grandma could throw together before the table was even set. Sliced ham went straight into a hot skillet, sometimes with just a dab of butter or the leftover fat from breakfast. A quick sear on each side was all it needed. Meanwhile, the applesauce, homemade if you had a backyard tree, canned if you were in a hurry, was warming on the back burner. This was dinner you could smell from the front porch. The saltiness of the ham played off the soft, tart sweetness of the apples in a way that felt balanced, simple, and oddly comforting. It was a meal for days when you were tired, when groceries were thin, or when you just needed something that felt familiar. And the best part? No oven. No long wait. Just a skillet, a spoon, and a little heat. Folks might not talk about ham and applesauce as a main course anymore, but for a generation raised on wartime thrift and flavor that did not waste time, this was a weeknight miracle. If you ever needed proof that sweet and salty go hand in hand, here it is. Nobody is a stranger to wraps and how they dominate the bread world as one of the best things you could do with dough or pita or whatever wrap you have. Honey mustard chicken wraps are one kind in particular that have been really popular all over America, since a lot of families grew up eating these or bringing them to school. They were one of the most commonly demanded things to eat. Everywhere you would go, there was a craze for honey mustard wraps that was hard to beat out and impossible to escape. McDonald's had their own budget-friendly versions that did amazingly well with the people too, and home chefs soon found ways to even copy that. As a result, these chicken wraps have become a regular part of the average American diet plan. Also, they just work so well since they are pretty quick to eat too and can be made pretty fast as well. If you know what you are doing, 10 minutes is all you need to assemble and have a wrap ready to go. Number 19, tuna salad on bread. One can of chunk light tuna cost $1.09 in 2024. A spoonful of mayonnaise, a pinch of salt, a squeeze of lemon if you had it. Mash it with a fork, spread it on bread. 2 minutes. Church food pantries across the Midwest packed tuna, mayonnaise packets, and bread together in bags because they knew this was the meal most seniors would actually make. Not the dried pasta. Not the canned vegetables that required a pot and a stove and energy that some people did not have. The tuna sandwich. Dorothy Hale, a 74-year-old widow in Wichita, Kansas, told a food bank volunteer in 2019 that she ate tuna on bread 5 nights a week. The volunteer asked if she wanted something different. Dorothy said no. She said the tuna was easy and the bread was soft, and she could eat it watching the evening news without getting up. That was enough. The American canned tuna industry peaked in 1989 when the average American ate 3.5 pounds of canned tuna per year. Number 23. Hamburger steak with onion gravy. A quarter pound of ground chuck at 99 cents a pound. 1 yellow onion. A splash of beef broth from a bouillon cube. Frank shaped the patty with his bare hands, pressed his thumb into the middle so it would not dome up on the electric coil, and laid it in the cold pan. The trick on a Kenmore was to start cold. 7 minutes total. The onions went in after the patty came out. You scraped the brown bits off the bottom with the bouillon water and let it reduce while you buttered a slice of bread. That was the gravy. Southern grandmothers served this over mashed potatoes on Sundays. A retired machinist ate it over the bread, standing up, pocket watch on the counter. Same dish, different table. The first frost came fast in the mountains and killed whatever was still green overnight. Fried green tomatoes were what you made the week before. Every tomato that hadn't ripened, sliced thick, dredged through cornmeal with salt and pepper, and laid into a skillet of hot bacon grease until the outside went golden and crackled and the inside softened just enough to give. They weren't the romanticized version that arrived in restaurants decades later. They were a practical harvest, a way of eating what would otherwise rot on the vine. The cornmeal crust transformed the chalky bitterness of an unripe tomato into something with texture and heat, and enough fat to feel like a meal. Mountain families in North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee had done this since the 19th century, using cornmeal ground at the nearest mill. You never added anything fancy to the dredge. The grease had to be hot enough that the slice sizzled the second it touched the pan. If it didn't, you'd waited too long. If you had to ask how hot the grease was, you weren't ready to cook them. If a single fried egg felt like enough, imagine what happened when you had a few hard-boiled ones left over from Easter. Creamed eggs on toast turned yesterday's extras into tonight's real supper. Chopped eggs folded into a simple white sauce, spooned over bread. Fannie Farmer published a version called Eggs a la Goldenrod in 1896, where you separated yolk from white, stirred the whites into bechamel, and grated the yolk over the top like dust from a goldenrod flour. That golden crumble is where the name came from. Through the 30s and 40s, this became the standard day-after-Easter meal in households that couldn't afford to waste a single egg. The preparation took 8 minutes. Melt butter, stir in flour, add milk, season, fold in the eggs. 1 saucepan and 1 piece of toast. For the women who made this alone in their later years, it was never Easter anymore. It was just Tuesday. But the taste still carried something from a kitchen table that used to be crowded. Milk toast was the quiet companion of countless evenings spent alone, a dish so simple it seemed too humble to call dinner. Yet for seniors watching every penny during the 1950s and 60s, this warm bowl delivered exactly what tired bodies needed. Stale bread was never wasted in those kitchens where thrift meant survival. Slices were toasted lightly, placed in a shallow bowl, and covered with warm milk heated with butter and a pinch of salt. The bread softened into something between solid and liquid, easy to eat for those with dental troubles or diminished appetites. Some added sugar or cinnamon when sweetness was needed. The cost was negligible since milk and bread were pantry constants, and preparation took barely 5 minutes. Milk toast carried memories of childhood sickbeds and mothers tending fevered children. For seniors eating alone, this bowl meant warmth without fuss and nourishment without pretense. Harvard beets transformed the humble root vegetable into a glistening ruby red side dish that added color and sophistication to holiday spreads in mere minutes. Grandmothers kept canned beets in their pantries year-round, but brought them out especially at Christmas when their deep crimson color complemented the seasonal table. The sauce came together quickly: sugar, cornstarch, and vinegar whisked in a saucepan until thickened. Then the drained beets were stirred in to coat. The balance of sweet and tangy created a flavor that even beet skeptics could appreciate, the vinegar cutting through richness while sugar smoothed any earthy edges. A pat of butter stirred in at the end added gloss and richness that made the dish look like it required far more effort than it actually did. Harvard beets held well in warming dishes, making them ideal for buffet-style holiday meals where timing was unpredictable. The recipe appeared in community cookbooks across America, each version slightly different but all achievable in under 10 minutes. Baked apples with cinnamon sugar were the heartwarming dessert that proved simplicity never went out of style, a 10-minute wonder that felt like hours of care. Core the apples, fill the hollow with brown sugar, cinnamon, and a pat of butter, then bake until the skin turned glossy and the filling bubbled over like molten caramel. The scent filled every corner of the house, sweet, spiced, and soft, like the comfort of wool blankets and laughter at the table. The apples collapsed slightly, their texture turning tender but not mushy, the syrup pooling at the bottom of the dish. The joy of cooking listed it among quick sweets, meant for nights when time was short, but the craving for kindness lingered. Served warm with cream, whipped topping, or ice cream, it felt indulgent without excess. Each bite carried the warmth of memory, the flavor of home, and the calm of something perfectly ordinary done perfectly well. Popcorn balls were the true taste of Halloween chaos wrapped in butter and sugar. You poured hot syrup over a bowl of plain popcorn, stirred until your arms ached, and rolled the sticky mess into glowing golden balls. Every house smelled like caramelized sweetness and salt. Kids would line up with greasy hands, holding wax paper squares to keep from burning their fingers. It was a family effort, parents working the pot, kids pressing the popcorn into shape, laughter cutting through the sound of crackling kernels. When the balls cooled, they were glossy, firm, and just a little dangerous to bite. They stuck to your teeth, pulled at your cheeks, and left you reaching for more. Wrapped in plastic or wax paper, they filled treat bags across the block. They were messy, imperfect, and made with real work, which made them even better. Each bite was a crunchy mix of home, chaos, and candy. Popcorn balls were Halloween made by hand, the kind that left you sticky but smiling long after the doorbell stopped ringing. Banana and mayonnaise sandwiches were one of those strange little miracles of the 1920s kitchen. It sounds odd now, but back then, the sweet and savory combination was not only accepted, it was celebrated. Sliced bananas were laid gently on white bread, and mayonnaise acted like the glue that held the whole thing together. No butter, no jam, just banana and mayo. It was a quick lunchbox staple for children and adults alike, partly because both ingredients were cheap and widely available. Bananas had become more common thanks to improved transportation, and mayonnaise was starting to show up in homes as a ready-made product. It helped that refrigeration was still unreliable for many families, so shelf-stable or naturally resistant foods were a practical choice. This sandwich was quick to prepare, filling enough to stand in for a small meal, and easy to eat on the go. It was also one of those things that people either loved or quietly avoided, depending on which side of the sandwich war you fell on. But if your family made it in the 1920s, chances are you have at least one memory of someone munching on this creamy, fruity creation with zero hesitation. Salisbury steak patties with gravy mix offered a hearty plate in minutes, transforming ground beef into something that tasted like a slow Sunday supper. Lean beef was seasoned with onion powder, garlic, and a splash of Worcestershire, then shaped into oval patties and seared in a skillet until crisp on the outside and juicy inside. While the meat browned, a packet of instant brown gravy whisked together with water created a smooth sauce in a separate pan. Once the patties were done, they were nestled into the bubbling gravy for a final simmer that coated them in rich flavor. Served over mashed potatoes or buttered toast, the meal felt far more elaborate than the clock revealed. Working parents loved the speed and the hearty comfort, while children scooped up every drop of gravy with the last crust of bread. It was a dinner that turned a simple pound of beef into something warm, filling, and memorable, the kind of dish that proves convenience and care can live on the same plate. Salmon patties with saltine crumbs were a classic end-of-the-week dinner, The kind of meal you made when the fridge looked sad and the meat was long gone. Canned salmon was a miracle in itself. Cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with enough protein to make you feel like you had not missed a step. Grandma would mix it up with crushed saltine crackers, a beaten egg, and maybe a sprinkle of onion or celery if there was any left. She would form them into small patties and fry them in the same pan that had seen 5 meals already. The result? Golden, crispy outsides with soft, savory centers. They had just enough flavor to make you forget they came from a can and not the sea. Served with peas or creamed corn, or just a dollop of mayonnaise on the side, it was the kind of humble meal that never needed applause. It showed up quietly, did its job, and vanished without complaint. But it left everyone full and just a little more hopeful. That is what dinner was supposed to do. Not impressed, not sparkle, just comfort. And that is exactly what these little salmon cakes delivered. So here is a dish that you may not see coming or be prepared for, but it actually works really well this way too. We are talking about peanut butter jelly and banana toast, which is exactly what it sounds like. You take some toast, preferably toast until it's crunchy, then lather it with as much peanut butter and jelly as you desire, and layer it with sliced bananas. You may have only heard of that combo as a part of some protein shake or smoothie, but it works just as well sitting on top of bread as it does in a glass. This is also a perfectly refreshing option for when you are low on work, and grandmas obviously kept that in mind. When they could just tell that somebody in the household needed a sugar rush and a kick from behind to get them into high gear, they would feed them a lot more toast than was probably wise, but it would work every time. Number 22, fried egg sandwich. 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, a pat of butter. Total cost in 2024, 63 cents. You melted the butter in a skillet, cracked the eggs, waited 3 minutes, put them between the bread, and sat down. That was it. The Depression generation ate fried egg sandwiches the way modern Americans eat fast food, quickly, cheaply, without thinking. But the nutritional math was different. 2 eggs had 12 grams of protein, B12, and choline, a nutrient that most seniors were deficient in and that doctors now link to memory and brain function. Diners across America sold fried egg sandwiches for 35 cents in the 1970s. By the 1990s, they had mostly disappeared from menus. But in kitchens where money was tight and time was short, the fried egg sandwich never went anywhere. Edna Kowalski, a retired seamstress in Toledo, Ohio, made one every morning and every evening for 19 years. She called it her bookend meal. The day started and ended the same way. That rhythm mattered to her more than the food itself. Number 21, pork chop and apple skillet. A 1970s church cookbook from Washington County, Pennsylvania, called this dish pork chop casserole and told you to bake it 45 minutes at 400 degrees. Frank did not have 45 minutes in him on a Tuesday. He browned 1 thin-cut chop, 4 minutes aside on medium-high, pulled it out, dropped sliced Granny Smith into the same pan with a pat of butter and a pinch of cinnamon, and by the time the apples were soft, the chop had rested enough to cut. 1 pan, 9 minutes, 1 plate. The old recipe was not wrong. It was written for a woman feeding 6 people on a Sunday, not a widower eating alone on a Tuesday in October. That difference, in the end, was the only thing that mattered about the adaptation. Nobody called them hoe cakes because they were fashionable. They got the name because early Appalachian settlers sometimes cooked them on the flat of a hoe blade held over an open fire when no skillet was available, a technique documented in the Foxfire series of oral histories from the 1970s. By the time these kitchens were at their peak, hoe cakes were made in cast iron with no ceremony. Cornmeal, a pinch of salt, enough water for a pourable batter, dropped onto a hot greased skillet in silver dollar rounds and cooked until the edges went lacy. They were done in under 10 minutes. No oven, no yeast, no waiting. You could make them while the beans simmered and have bread on the table before the pot was ready. Some cooks added an egg. Most didn't. They used what they had, which was cornmeal and bacon grease in a hot pan. Younger generations grew up thinking cornbread always came from a box and always baked in the oven. So the knowledge of making bread on a stovetop with nothing but cornmeal and heat slipped away quietly, without anyone choosing to let it go. Egg in a hole went by a dozen names depending on who raised you. Egg in a basket, egg in a frame, one-eyed Sam, and every family swore their name was the only right one. You pressed a drinking glass into the center of a slice of bread, dropped it into a buttered skillet, and cracked an egg right into the hole. The concept appeared in American cookbooks in the late 1800s, and Italian immigrants brought their own version, uova fritte nel pane, through Ellis Island around the same time. The trick your grandfather knew, the part nobody writes down, was frying that little bread circle alongside the toast in the same pan, using it to soak up the runny yolk like an edible spoon. 5 minutes, 1 egg, 1 slice of bread, 1 pat of butter. For a senior eating alone, it remains one of the most satisfying meals a single skillet and a quiet morning can produce. Soft-boiled eggs with toast soldiers turned a simple egg into an interactive meal that brought small pleasure to solitary dining. Seniors who grew up with this British-influenced tradition continued preparing it well into later years, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. The egg was lowered gently into boiling water and cooked for exactly 3 to 4 minutes, producing set white and gloriously runny yolk. Meanwhile, toast was prepared and cut into narrow strips called soldiers, ready for dipping. The egg sat in a small cup, its top carefully removed to reveal golden liquid within. Each toast soldier was dipped into the yolk, emerging coated in rich goodness that made plain bread taste extraordinary. The meal cost almost nothing yet felt ceremonial, requiring attention that gave structure to evenings that might otherwise blur together. For seniors eating alone, the process of dipping and eating provided small entertainment alongside nourishment. Stuffed celery stalks were the appetizer side dish hybrid that grandmothers arranged on relish trays, their hollow channels filled with cheese spreads that guests scooped out with satisfying crunches. The preparation took mere minutes. Wash and trim celery into manageable lengths, then pipe or spread softened cream cheese mixed with whatever additions the family preferred. Pimiento cheese was popular, as were versions with blue cheese crumbles, chopped olives, or crispy bacon bits folded into the cream cheese base. Children loved the celery boats filled with peanut butter, while adults preferred more sophisticated combinations with herbs and spices. The stalks could be prepared hours ahead, covered with damp paper towels to prevent drying, then arranged on platters just before guests arrived. Stuffed celery represented the relish tray era when no holiday table was complete without an assortment of pickles, olives, and vegetable preparations that kept appetites occupied while the main meal finished cooking. Celery and olive sandwiches were the quiet, crisp heart of many bridge clubs and ladies' luncheons. Finely chopped celery mixed with sliced green olives and mayonnaise was spread thick between soft white bread, crusts neatly trimmed. The result was light, salty, and refreshing. A bite that crunched softly and vanished fast. They were the definition of elegance in simplicity, the kind of food that appeared without fanfare, but stayed in memory. The joy of cooking tucked this one away under quick sandwiches, proof that you could make something graceful in minutes. Served with tea or lemonade, they were more social ritual than recipe. Their freshness offset heavier dishes, making them a reliable favorite at every gathering. One bite was enough to recall the clink of china and the sound of soft laughter. It was food for conversation, light as air but full of care, the taste of a gentler time. Jell-O jigglers were the wobbly wonder of every Halloween party. You mixed up packets of gelatin, poured them into Halloween molds, and waited for the fridge to work its magic. When they popped out, they shined like little jewels, orange pumpkins, green bats, purple ghosts. Kids poked, squished, and giggled before eating them, half playing, half snacking. They were sweet, slippery, and impossible not to smile at. Parents loved them because they were cheap and quick to make, a rare treat that was both clean and fun. You could line them up on trays, bright and jiggly like edible toys. The 70s loved their gelatin, and this was its finest hour. Jell-O jigglers made every table look like a party, even if the decorations were just paper streamers and store candy. A little water, a packet, and patience. That was all it took to make joy jiggle. Pineapple and cheese canapes were the darlings of quick party food. Take a canned pineapple ring or chunk, top it with cream cheese or a cube of cheddar, and serve it cold with a toothpick. Done. Colorful, quirky, and ready in 10 minutes. These little bites showed up in tea rooms and luncheons during the 1920s, when canned fruit was becoming more common and refrigeration was still catching up. Pineapple had an exotic charm, sweet, golden, and seen as a luxury from faraway places. Paired with the saltiness of cheese, it made for a surprisingly balanced bite. These canapés were often served on crackers or toast, but more often they were just stacked and speared. Housewives clipped the recipe from magazines which called them elegant and economical. They worked just as well for guests as they did for family suppers. And while the combination sounds odd to us now, in the 1920s it was considered stylish, simple, fast, and oddly fancy. It checked all the boxes. Egg and potato. Hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. Sloppy Joes had already earned their place in the American kitchen by the time Grandma figured out how to make them faster. Instead of hamburger buns, she grabbed slices of toast, whatever white sandwich bread was left in the bread box. Ground beef got tossed into the skillet with a little onion, then drowned in a quick mix of ketchup, mustard, and a pinch of sugar if you had it. No special seasonings, no packets, no fuss. Once the mixture was bubbling, it got spooned right over the toast and served just like that, open-faced, hot, and ready to fall apart in your hands. That was half the fun. It dripped, it stained your fingers, and it always tasted better the messier it was. This was a dinner for families who were too tired to sit proper but still wanted to eat together. It was loud, quick, and honest. And even though it came from a time of tight belts and short patience, it tasted like something you might pay good money for at a diner today. That is the thing about Sloppy Joe toast. It always fed more than just your stomach. Cinnamon sugar toast is a delightful breakfast combo that was a go-to for grandmas not just for their kids and grandkids, but for their own mornings as well. Sometimes all you need from the world is a good toast and a healthy hit of glucose, and cinnamon sugar does that like nothing else. Cinnamon in particular started getting a lot more popular as an ingredient during the times most of our grandmas were alive, since a lot of bakeries started using it with maple syrup and vanilla, though it was always a popular choice. It is just that little variations in daily meals did not start popping up until the 1910s or 1920s, and since then, cinnamon has become a mainstay highlight of all things that scream USA food. Number 24, peanut butter and banana sandwich. George Washington Carver spent decades proving that the peanut could feed a nation. He was right. A jar of peanut butter cost $2.50 in 2024 and lasted a single person 2 weeks. A bunch of bananas cost 65 cents. 2 slices of bread, a smear of peanut butter, half a banana sliced on top. That was a meal with 15 grams of protein, potassium, and enough calories to carry a person through an entire evening. Senior centers across the rural South served this as an afternoon meal because it required no refrigeration, no preparation space, and no cleanup beyond a butter knife and a plate. Harold Meeks, a retired carpenter in Paducah, Kentucky, ate one every night at 5:30 for the last 4 years of his life. His daughter found the routine maddening. His doctor found his potassium levels perfect. The USDA reported in 2023 that peanut butter was the single most consumed protein source among Americans over the age of 75 who lived alone. Not chicken, not eggs. Peanut butter. The reason was not taste. Number 24, tuna melt. The tuna melt showed up on Howard Johnson's menus in the mid-1970s, but working people had been making it at home since after the war. 1 can of chicken of the sea, 49 cents in 1979. A spoon of Hellmann's, a stalk of celery chopped fine, a slice of American cheese. Frank buttered 2 slices of rye, laid the tuna mix on one, draped the cheese on top, and pressed the sandwich into the hot skillet. 4 minutes aside. The cheese ran out onto the bread and caught on the pan and turned into the brown lace that separates a tuna melt from a tuna sandwich. He cut it diagonal, always. Rose had cut it diagonal, and he kept doing it because that was what he knew. Chocolate gravy is exactly the kind of dish that makes people from outside Appalachia raise an eyebrow until they taste it. In Kentucky and Tennessee mountain kitchens, it was made with cocoa powder, flour, sugar, and water. No milk, no butter, cooked until thick and glossy, then spooned hot over biscuits as a supper that was both meal and dessert, and neither one exactly. The recipe spread through families in the Cumberland Plateau, from women who knew that sugar and starch could fill a stomach as surely as any meat, and that children who refused beans for the 3rd night running would eat without complaint if something sweet came with it. The wider food world discovered chocolate gravy in the early 2000s and called it Southern, but it was Appalachian first, specific to these mountains. Every family made it slightly differently, some using milk, some adding butter at the end, some keeping no written recipe at all. When your grandmother stopped making it, the version she made stopped existing, and the distance between her version and every other version closed to nothing. Canned salmon patties turned a 79-cent tin into something that smelled like a real kitchen was operating again. You drained the salmon, picked out the soft bones, though plenty of old cooks left them in, knowing they were pure calcium, mashed it with a fork, mixed in a beaten egg, a handful of cracker crumbs, and diced onion, then shaped them into patties and fried them in bacon grease until the edges went dark and crisp. 8 minutes from tin to plate. During the Depression and the war, canned pink salmon was one of the most reliable stored proteins a household could keep, and salmon patties became the Friday night supper in Catholic homes across the Midwest and South. No meat on Fridays, but fish was always fine. By the 1950s, mothers made these without looking at a recipe because the recipe was already in their hands. The smell of salmon frying in a cast-iron skillet still brings certain people straight to a kitchen that no longer exists, with a woman standing at the stove who stopped answering a long time ago. Cottage cheese and canned fruit became staple supper for seniors who needed protein without cooking effort and welcomed sweetness without dessert guilt. This combination required nothing more than spooning cottage cheese onto a plate and arranging canned peach halves, pear slices, or fruit cocktail alongside. The curds provided protein and calcium, while fruit offered vitamins and comfort of something sweet. During the 1950s and 60s, this was considered health food, recommended by doctors for patients needing gentle nourishment. The cottage cheese came in different curd sizes according to preference, and canned fruit ranged from budget brands to premium varieties. Some seniors added cinnamon or honey when company feelings struck. The cost remained minimal, since both ingredients kept well and stretched across multiple meals. Cottage cheese and canned fruit represented the intersection of economy and nutrition that practical seniors navigated daily, providing satisfaction without demanding time or energy. Cranberry orange relish was the bright, fresh condiment that grandmothers whipped up in their new food processors or old-fashioned meat grinders, while other dishes simmered on the stove. Unlike the jellied cranberry sauce that slid from cans, this relish sparkled with texture and tartness that cut through rich holiday foods like nothing else could. The recipe required just 3 ingredients: fresh cranberries, a whole orange cut into chunks including the peel, and sugar to taste. Everything went through the grinder or processor until coarsely chopped, the orange oils releasing their perfume as they mixed with the berries. The relish needed time for flavors to meld, but the actual preparation took under 5 minutes of active work. Grandmothers made it the night before or early Christmas morning, letting it chill while they focused on the main meal. The vibrant ruby color looked stunning in cut glass dishes that came out only for holidays, proving that the simplest preparations often made the most beautiful presentations. Egg nests were breakfast theater in 10 minutes flat. Egg whites were whipped into glossy clouds, shaped into little nests, and baked just long enough to firm before the yolks were added back in. The result was a dish that looked far fancier than it was, light, airy, and golden at the center. The Joy of Cooking described it as a dainty breakfast, perfect for brunches or special mornings. Housewives loved it because it turned a single egg into something spectacular. The contrast between the soft yolk and crisp-edged white made every bite feel delicate. Served with buttered toast or a slice of ham, it looked like something straight from a hotel breakfast tray. Children watched in awe as the nests puffed up in the oven. It was fast, pretty, and impossibly charming, the kind of forgotten magic that made morning feel like an occasion. Popcorn trail mix was the kind of Halloween treat that brought sweet and salty together like best friends. You started with a bowl of plain popcorn, tossed in candy corn and peanuts, and poured melted butter over the top until everything glistened. It stuck lightly to your fingers, crunchy and sticky in the best way. The candy corn melted just enough to coat the popcorn with color, little flashes of orange and yellow glowing like tiny lights. Parents made it by the handful for parties, packing it into plastic bags or paper cups for kids to grab on their way out. It was noisy to eat, fun to share, and impossible to stop munching once you started. Every bite was a surprise, some sweet, some salty, all delicious. It was simple, chaotic, and perfect for the season. In the 70s, this was the kind of snack that showed up everywhere: living rooms, classrooms, and trick-or-treat tables lined with plastic pumpkins. It was Halloween flavor without the fuss, quick enough to make in a hurry and good enough to disappear fast. Egg lemon soup, or avgolemono, was fast, filling, and smooth. Greek immigrants brought the recipe with them, and it quickly spread to American kitchens. You just needed broth, a beaten egg, lemon juice, and something starchy like rice or orzo. The trick was slowly stirring in the egg so the heat thickened the soup without scrambling it. The result was creamy without cream, brightened by lemon, and warm enough to soothe anything. Greek-American families swore by it. By the 1920s, it showed up in cookbooks as lemon egg soup or quick Greek broth. Light but hearty, it matched the era's need for meals that felt comforting but cost little. If the broth was hot and the egg ready, you could have it on the table in 10 minutes. It was quiet, soft, and somehow still bold. Steak tips with garlic butter turned small pieces of beef into a dinner that tasted far more luxurious than the clock allowed. Bite-sized cubes of steak were seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in a smoking hot skillet until browned on the outside and just tender within. As the meat rested for a moment, butter melted in the pan with minced garlic and a handful of fresh parsley, creating a sauce that smelled like a steakhouse. The sizzling butter was poured back over the meat, coating every piece in rich, garlicky flavor. Served over toast, rice, or even plain with a side of vegetables, the dish offered restaurant-style indulgence in the time it took to set the table. Families loved how a modest amount of beef could feel like a feast, and the sound of butter hitting the hot pan became a signal that the day's work was over and something delicious was ready. Peanut butter and bacon sounds like a dare today, but to Grandma, it was just Tuesday lunch. This was a sandwich born in the tail end of the Great Depression and carried proudly into the next decade by people who knew how to stretch every ingredient. She would fry up strips of bacon until they crackled, drain them on the same paper towel she used all week, then lay them across a thick spread of peanut butter on white sandwich bread. That was it. No lettuce, no tomato, no fancy mayonnaise. Just salt, fat, protein, and speed. Kids loved the crunch. Grown-ups loved how it filled you up without burning through the grocery budget. And for something so strange-sounding, it just worked. The warmth of the bacon softened the peanut butter slightly, and the two came together like old friends who had nothing in common but always got along. Sometimes she would add a second slice of bread, but often it was open-faced and served cold. It was portable, practical, and surprisingly satisfying. And in homes where time was short and mouths were many, that counted for everything. You might laugh at it now, but one bite would probably bring it all back. Egg salad was another classic that people would often come home to when visiting their grandparents for Thanksgiving or just on the weekend in general. Egg salad typically consists of mayonnaise, mustard, and green onions, which add both color and crunch to the dish. When you think of a salad, your mind tends to immediately think boring and unimaginative, but egg salads can toss those opinions right out the window with just one bow. Especially if your grandma left her recipe laying around in some journal or cookbook she compiled all throughout her life. Egg salad in particular would go very well with rye, and it would work as a sandwich too. Grandmas loved bringing this one along for family picnics. Number 13. Scrambled eggs and toast. Clara Canucciari was 93 years old when her grandson filmed her making Depression-era recipes in her kitchen. One of the first things she made was scrambled eggs. She cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, stirred them with a fork, poured them into a buttered pan, and pushed them around for 90 seconds. 2 slices of toast on the side. That was dinner. During the Depression, her family ate scrambled eggs 3 or 4 times a week because a dozen eggs cost 18 cents in 1933, and each egg was a self-contained meal. In 2024, a dozen eggs cost around $3.50 at most grocery stores, which still made each egg less than 30 cents. For a senior with limited grip strength, cracking eggs was sometimes the hardest part. Some kept a small bowl on the counter to crack them against the edge. Some bought liquid eggs in cartons. The adaptation was quiet, practical, and invisible, like most things seniors did to keep themselves fed. The videos Clara made with her grandson gained millions of views on YouTube. Number 20. Egg in a basket. The first printed American recipe showed up in the 1890 Boston Cooking School cookbook under the name Eggs with a Hat. By the 1930s, when sliced bread hit the stores, every child in America knew the dish by a different name: bird in the nest, toad in the hole, gasoline sandwich in some parts of Pennsylvania. Frank used a juice glass to cut the hole, buttered both sides of the bread, and laid it in the pan. The egg cracked into the hole. 3 minutes covered, 1 minute uncovered, and the toast caught gold around the yolk. He saved the cutout circle, fried it alongside, and used it to mop the last of the yolk off the plate. Nothing wasted. That rule came from the Depression, and old men who lived through it never stopped obeying it. Bulldog gravy was what you made when there was no meat at all, also called white gravy or milk gravy or just gravy with no qualifier. It started with whatever fat you had, a heaping spoon of flour stirred in until the roux thickened, and then milk or water poured in slow. In Appalachia, the version made with water instead of milk was sometimes called poor gravy, even by the people who ate it, because they knew the difference and they felt it. You poured it over day-old cornbread that had gone dry, and the gravy brought it back to something that could fill a stomach. In Kentucky and West Virginia, mining communities during the Depression, and again during the coal slowdowns of the 1950s and 60s, this was what supper looked like on the worst weeks of the month. Not a figure of speech, just the actual food on the actual table. The children who ate it grew up and moved to cities and never made it again, and some never told their own kids it had existed. She made herself a fried egg sandwich almost every night after he died. Not because she loved them, though she did, but because it was the one meal she could make without thinking. Bread in the toaster, butter in the skillet, egg cracked one-handed the way she'd done it 10,000 times before. In the 1940s, when eggs ran 25 cents a dozen, a fried egg sandwich was the cheapest hot supper in the country. Every diner counter served one. Every mother knew how her family liked their yolks, broken flat or left soft enough to run through the bread. The whole thing took under 5 minutes and needed nothing that wasn't already in the kitchen. For seniors living alone, the fried egg sandwich survives not because it's exciting, but because it's steady. The same pan, the same quiet pop of egg hitting hot butter, night after night, in a kitchen that used to sound completely different. Peanut butter on crackers provided complete protein and staying power without requiring a single pot or pan. Seniors living on fixed incomes during the 1960s and 70s kept jars of peanut butter in their pantries as insurance against hunger. Saltines, graham crackers, or Ritz crackers served as the canvas for this thick, sticky spread that required some effort to eat, but rewarded patience with satisfaction. The peanut butter could be spread thin for economy, or thick for indulgence depending on the day's mood and the jar's remaining contents. Some seniors drizzled honey over their peanut butter crackers, or added sliced banana when fruit was available. The combination of fat, protein, and carbohydrate kept blood sugar stable through long evenings. This meal required no cooking, no cleanup beyond a knife wiped clean, and no particular skill. Peanut butter on crackers represented pure practicality, transformed into genuine sustenance for people who understood that simple did not mean inadequate. Quick corn relish brought tangy sweetness and crunch to holiday tables through a recipe that required nothing more than opening jars and stirring ingredients together. Grandmothers combined canned corn with diced pimientos, chopped green peppers, minced onion, and a simple dressing of vinegar, sugar, and celery seed. The relish came together in minutes, but tasted like something that had simmered and developed flavors for hours. Its bright yellow color studded with red and green made it look festive without any special effort, while its sweet, sour flavor complemented everything from turkey to ham to roast beef. Some families served corn relish as a side dish in small bowls, while others spooned it directly onto meat as a condiment. The recipe traveled well, making it perfect for potlucks and family gatherings where everyone brought a dish to share. Quick corn relish embodied the practical wisdom of grandmothers who knew that impressive results didn't require impressive effort. Shrimp wiggle was one of those mid-century wonders that sounded playful but tasted like pure indulgence. Canned shrimp were folded into a quick cream sauce made with milk, butter, and flour, then brightened with a handful of green peas. It was served bubbling hot over saltine crackers or toast, ready in 10 minutes and perfect for company. The joy of cooking presented it as a pantry meal, proof that elegance could live in a can. The name alone made people smile, a hint that mealtime could still be fun even when rushed. The sauce shimmered pale pink, the shrimp tender and mild. It was a dish that combined thrift with theater, turning modest ingredients into something you would never call ordinary. The moment you broke through the creamy layer with your fork, steam carried the scent of butter and the sea. It was quick cooking at its finest, cheerful, comforting, and quietly clever. Witch hat cookies were a tiny piece of Halloween magic you could make in minutes. You started with fudge-striped cookies, pressed a Hershey's Kiss on top, and sealed it with a ring of orange frosting. Suddenly, you had a witch's hat, cute, sweet, and completely snackable. Parents made them for school parties or trick-or-treat trays when time was running out. They were colorful, easy, and impossible to mess up. The chocolate melted slightly, blending the cookie and candy into one bite of sugar and nostalgia. Kids loved decorating them, smearing icing everywhere while sneaking kisses into their mouths. Each hat looked a little different, but that only made them more charming. They were the kind of treat that came together in a hurry, but still felt special. Halloween in the 70s was about that. Fun without the fuss, laughter over perfection. Witch hat cookies captured that spirit perfectly, a sweet reminder that joy could be made in 10 minutes flat. Buttered noodles with parsley were the weekday workhorse of many kitchens. You boiled the noodles, drained them fast, and tossed them with butter and chopped herbs. That was dinner, or lunch, or breakfast, if nothing else was around. Parsley and butter were easier to come by than meat or eggs. A warm, buttery bowl felt like comfort without the cost. Kids loved it for its plainness. Adults loved it because it was always ready. And it never took more than 10 minutes. The recipe came from European kitchens, but by the 1920s it was everywhere. It was not fancy, it was dependable. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture, a quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup, and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. Spam and cabbage was the kind of meal that did not sound like much but got the job done, and then some. Grandma would slice the spam into thick chunks and toss it into a hot pan until the edges crisped and curled. Then came the shredded cabbage, sizzling as it hit the fat, softening in the salt, and soaking up every bit of flavor. A splash of vinegar or a pinch of sugar if she felt like balancing things out. That was it. No special tools, no hard steps. But the kitchen always smelled like something better than it should have. The cabbage turned silky. The spam, golden and caramelized. You could eat it on its own or pile it over mashed potatoes or rice if you had extra. For many, it was a depression holdover. For others, it was just what you made when payday was still a few days away. It was salty, hearty, and fast. The holy trinity of Grandma's weekday dinners. And for all the jokes people made about spam, no one left hungry. You might laugh at the idea now, but back then, this was dinner you could trust. Speaking of adding butter to the mix and elevating the dish, cheese has a pretty similar effect when you mix it with some scrambled eggs. It was one of the dreamiest breakfasts you could wake up to. The scent of freshly scrambled eggs forming a clear road that guided you to the kitchen, with each step taken increasing that early morning appetite. Once you sit, you are blessed with the glorious glow of cheese mixed with shining yolk and brilliant egg whites, scrambled to complete perfection mixed in with Grandma's special seasonings. That usually just meant a dash of paprika and oregano here and there. What was truly special, though, is how Grandma would manage to melt the cheese into the egg without compromising on how scrambled it was, which is an art lost to them now. Number 15. Tomato soup with crackers. A can of Campbell's condensed tomato soup cost $1.29 and had been sitting in American pantries since 1897. You added water or milk, heated it on the stove or in the microwave, and crumbled saltines into it until the surface disappeared under a layer of soggy crackers. That was the ritual. Andy Warhol made the can famous in 1962, but the soup was already famous in every kitchen where money was tight and time was shorter. Senior centers served tomato soup with grilled cheese as their most popular lunch combination for decades. For a person eating alone, the soup was warm and familiar, and the crackers gave you something to do with your hands. Eating slowly, breaking each cracker into pieces, watching them sink, it was almost a meditation. Campbell's sold more than 2.5 billion cans of soup per year in the United States during the 2010s. Internal marketing research leaked in 2019 showed that adults over 65 accounted for 38% of all condensed soup purchases, the largest single demographic. The company knew this. Number 15. Skillet cornbread and milk. This was the oldest dish on the list. The recipe went back to farmhouses in Tennessee and Kentucky in the 1830s, carried north with the migrations of the 1910s and 1940s. A wedge of cold cornbread left over from the weekend, a glass of whole milk poured over it in a bowl. That was it. No cooking required, so technically it broke the 10-minute rule, but Frank kept it on his list because his father, Vincenzo, who had come to Pittsburgh from Abruzzo in 1906 and worked the open hearth furnaces at Homestead, had eaten it every night of his last winter in 1962. You crumble the cornbread, pour the milk, let it sit 1 minute to soften. Eat with a spoon. You do not chew cornbread and milk. You take it in the way old men take the last good thing of the day. Squirrel was free, and in the hills of eastern Kentucky and western North Carolina, free meat meant everything when the alternative was money the family didn't have. A single gray squirrel filled a skillet. 2 or 3 made a proper supper. Brown the pieces in hot lard until the outside crisped. Pull them out. Add flour and water, stir until the gravy thickened and turned a deep brown, and what you had was something wild and slightly nutty that no store-bought package ever matched. The squirrel hunting season in Appalachian communities was a social institution. Men and boys went out together in the early morning the way their fathers had, and what came back fed everyone for days. Mark Sohn, the food historian and author of Appalachian Home Cooking, documented squirrel gravy as one of the defining dishes of mountain Kentucky food culture, a dish that required no recipe because the women who made it had been making it their whole lives, as had the women who taught them. The knowledge lived in the hands, not in any written-down place, and when the hands stopped, so did the gravy. Hot water cornbread came from the oldest kitchens in America, Native American and African American homes, where cornmeal, salt, and water were sometimes everything a family had to work with. You poured boiling water over cornmeal and a pinch of salt, stirred until it formed a soft dough, shaped it into small patties with wet hands, and dropped them into a skillet of hot grease. The outside crisped golden in about 3 minutes per side. The inside stayed creamy and dense, almost like warm porridge. During the Depression, when a bag of cornmeal cost a few cents and could stretch for weeks, this was the dish that stood between hunger and holding on. No egg, no milk, no flour, just corn and water and fire. Some families crumbled it into a bowl of cold milk for supper. Others ate it alongside whatever greens they could pull from the yard. The women who made it never once measured the water. They poured until the dough felt right, and that feel lived nowhere but in their hands. Cinnamon toast delivered sweetness and warmth in under 5 minutes, becoming the default supper for seniors who craved comfort without complexity. The preparation was almost meditative. Bread was toasted until golden, then spread immediately with soft butter that melted into the warm surface. Sugar and cinnamon, pre-mixed in small jars kept near the stove, were sprinkled generously over the buttered surface. The heat caused the sugar to dissolve slightly, creating a thin, sweet crust that crackled between teeth. Some seniors placed their cinnamon toast under the broiler to caramelize the topping into something approaching candy. The aroma alone lifted spirits on difficult evenings. This was comfort food in its purest form, requiring nothing fancy and delivering everything needed. For widows and widowers eating alone during the 1950s and 60s, cinnamon toast meant dessert and dinner combined into one affordable, satisfying meal that tasted like childhood remembered. Ambrosia salad appeared at Christmas gatherings in cut glass bowls, its layers of fruit and coconut glistening with sweetness that children considered dessert masquerading as a side dish. Grandmothers assembled it from canned mandarin oranges, pineapple chunks, maraschino cherries, miniature marshmallows, and shredded coconut, all folded together with sour cream or whipped topping. The preparation required nothing more than opening cans, draining fruit, and stirring everything together in a large bowl before chilling. Some versions included sliced bananas added just before serving to prevent browning, while others incorporated chopped pecans for crunch. The name ambrosia referenced the food of the gods, and to children of the era, it truly seemed divine, sweet, creamy, and studded with colorful fruit and puffy marshmallows. Grandmothers knew the salad improved after chilling for an hour, allowing the marshmallows to soften slightly and the flavors to meld into creamy harmony. Those were 60 meals that prove you don't need money or time to eat well. You just need the recipes your grandmother kept in her head. If one of these brought back a memory or your family made their own version, drop it in the comments. Thousands of people watching right now would love to hear it. That's what this channel is for, keeping those recipes alive so they don't disappear with the generation that made them. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and thanks for watching.